Good evening, council, staff, and residents. I would like to start this evening by saying thank you so much for being here. This is the first time in 2.5 years that we have had residents and invested individuals in the gallery. So thank you so much for joining us. It's fantastic. May I have a mover and seconder to call the meeting to order, please? Councillors Moore and Garwood, that the regular meeting of the Council of the Township of Springwater of November 23rd, 2022 come to order at 6:30 p.m. All those in favor? And that is carried. Council, are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? And seeing there are none, I will move right along to item number 3.1, where I will now call upon David Jeffrey, a Reform Gravel Mining Coalition member, to present a delegation regarding moratoriums on gravel pit applications. Welcome, Mr. Jeffrey.
Good evening. Thank you for having me tonight to, I guess, your first business meeting. Wow, I'm honored. Thank you so much. My name is David Jeffrey. I just start with a land acknowledgement that we're here on the traditional territories of the Huron-Wendat, the Anishinaabe, and the Haudenosaunee peoples. I think it's always good to do that, especially when we're going to talk about land. I'm a resident in Tiny Township. I'm a member of the Reform Gravel Mining Coalition, and I'm on the board of directors with the Simcoe County Greenbelt Coalition. Some of you may be familiar with that. I've lived and worked in North Simcoe for over 30 years, in Oro-Medonte for 20, in Midland for 12, and now in Tiny for 5. My family's been in the Midland area for 5 generations. I founded and recently retired from the Centre de Santé Communautaire Chigimek Community Health Center in Midland recently. And I care deeply what happens in our region. Once in Tiny, I quickly learned about the far-reaching degradation occurring on French's Hill in Tiny Township. It also impacts Springwater and Oro-Medonte from the gravel mining activity, and wondered how this could happen. That hill is an aquifer recharge area delivering, I was to learn from Dr. Shattuck and Powell, the cleanest water in the world. Incredible. There are no human contaminants in the deep well samples. Unheard of. And that water is a world-class benchmark for purity comparisons. Those gravel industry activities that are only a few kilometers from my home moved me a year ago to want to participate in the Reform Gravel Mining Coalition. What I have learned is alarming, and I want to share some of that with you here today. I believe a briefing note, looks like this, was attached in your package for tonight. Thank you, Renee, for doing that. I'm here today to support the residents of Boothby Crescent. Thank you, Jennifer, Mayor, for coming over and saying hello. And those other residents that surround the proposed Gallagher Materials application for expansion of the Lewis Pit. This proposed expansion will cut further into an existing aquifer recharge area. The pit borders the environmentally significant menacing wetlands, and you have heard, I think, from residents about the direct and immediate impact that's occurring right now from the existing pit. Gravel mining is not a benign activity. It destroys the landscape. Let's be frank. That's what it does. Once the living layer of forest and field is scraped off, it can never be returned to what the land was like before destruction. Just, you can't do it. On average, over the last 20 years, 5,000 acres of land is destroyed per year in gravel mining. And in Ontario, right now, there are over 5,000 gravel pits. The gravel industry is sitting on 13 times the amount of gravel that is needed in Ontario right now. All this data is referenced in your brief, so I won't go into the references right here. Over the last 20 years, we've seen a 25% increase in the Ontario population, but there has not been an equivalent rise in the need for gravel. A recent study by the Good Roads Association, not published, mind you, but I had a chance to look at it. The researchers are quite thorough, called Mandating the Use of Reclaimed Asphalt Pavement indicates that Ontario has enough recycled gravel to pave Highway 401 22 times. Think about that. We lag far behind the rest of the world in recycling our gravel. On any given day, there are 20 communities confronting a new pit application or an expansion of an existing pit in Ontario. The industry has deep pockets and prefers communities to be isolated and overwhelmed trying to defend their communities. The creation of the Reformed Gravel Mining Coalition is an attempt to balance and even those scales. We provide support resources and a singular provincial voice. Almost all Ontario Land Tribunal decisions favor the industry in a very tilted decision-making process. Some of you may know this. Municipal governments, so you, are key partners for instilling more balance in the decision-making process. This is a key piece right here. When the Lewis Pit application for expansion, with that, let me describe the lay of the land, no pun intended here. The Ministry of Natural Resources and Forests has a pit and quarries interactive map that anyone can access. Some of you may have seen that. From that data, we can determine that within 10 kilometers of the Lewis Pit, the current pit, there are 12 gravel pits. 2 are municipal. 1 might be yours. I think it is actually. The private pits have a total annual license to extract 2.4 million tons per annum. Within 20 kilometers, another 17 pits. 27 pits within 20 kilometers is an excessive pit to community ratio. There is plenty of gravel available in the region, and an expansion of the Lewis Pit is not warranted. Rehabilitation of this pit will not occur for 75 years. That's their license. Limited data, it's very limited on purpose, on rehabilitation tells us that the frequency of disturbed land that is first shoveled in the ground for a new pit far outpaces rehabilitation in the province. And when I asked the engineer who was the representative of the proposed application at the open house, I said, well, why the expansion? Here's what they said: to make money. This described scenario as extremely problematic. We treat no other limited resource in this way. Little to no oversight. No overall coordinated plan to manage the resource over time. No rationalization of pit development that is responsive to community and environmental needs. Under today's rules, someone could buy land next to you, apply to rezone under the MZO process, completely bypass your process here, and start extracting gravel. These rules don't make any sense. While there is an aggregate act governing the industry, this provincial government, the current government, is making it easier and easier for industry to operate without accountability. Bill 23, the latest example of that, where third parties, me and my colleagues behind me, citizens groups, will lose the right to appeal the OLT regarding an expansion of a pit in their backyard. Removing citizen participation in the development process is an assault on democratic rights. Such will be the case here if the bill passes. As you know, the bill is proposed to be retroactive, although we don't know retroactive to when.
Mr. Jeffrey, you do have 10 minutes and you're at about 9.
Okay, I'm on my last
Thank you.
paragraphs here.
I'll just keep
There's very poor data to help us understand what is truly happening within the industry. Unlike other resource industries where data is paramount, we don't know what tonnage is coming out of a pit on a year-to-year basis, only what they are licensed. We don't know how much water is being taken to wash on a year-to-year basis, only what is licensed. By the way, the engineers here said they're likely going to wash gravel in the new expansion, which raises a whole host of other issues around groundwater. A recent study by the Ontario Sandstone and Gravel Association, the association that all gravel providers are part of, the Long Haul Report, indicates that 24% of the gravel mined in Ontario today leaves the country. This is a contraindication to the claim from the industry that we have to have more gravel extraction in Ontario. An operator who wishes to expand an existing pit or start a new one does not have to demonstrate that there is a need for that gravel. Think about that. No other industry functions this way. Making money is not a good enough reason to destroy 100 acres, particularly when the layer of living earth is the first layer of living water filtration for the well water we all depend on. There is no demonstrable need for the gravel from this application, for the application or expansion of Lewis Pit. What legacy do we want to leave our children and grandchildren? A scarred legacy here in Springwater. I urge you, Mayor and Council, to support a moratorium on approvals of new pits or expansion of existing pits until such time as an independent panel can study the industry and make reasonable recommendations for better oversight. We will always need gravel, but we have to be far more careful, thoughtful, and deliberate about how we extract this limited resource. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jeffrey. Procedurally, we will receive this and then I will open it up to council. May I have a mover and seconder to receive the delegation from David Jeffrey? Moved by Councillor Moore, second by Councillor Fisher. All those in favor? Thank you. And council, at this time, I will open it up to if you have any questions. And seeing that there are no, I forgot, we have Councillor Cabral joining us virtually, so I'm going back and forth. Or sorry, Deputy Mayor Cabral.
No problem at all. Thank you, Mayor Coghlan. I guess I just wanted to ask you, sir, if you might be able to shed a bit of light. I know there's a good number of gravel pits in Springwater Township itself, township having care of two. There's also been down Airport Roadway there in the Caledon Hills area for years. They've been trying to prevent a gravel pit, large gravel pit from taking place there. And up near Singhampton, there's a couple of pits there as well. My question to you, sir, would be, it seems to me that if someone wants gravel right now, they seem to feel the need to just open a pit rather than source out gravel from an existing pit. Can you comment on that? How prevalent that may or may not be?
Yeah, so.
Thank you, Deputy Cabral, and to yourself. Thank you, Jeffrey. Mr. Jeffrey, go ahead.
Sure. So a couple of things. Caledon recently passed an interim control bylaw to halt Votorantim, which is a Brazilian multinational, from opening a 600-acre pit just to the south and west of Caledon, right next to the Forks of the Credit. The interim control bylaw was passed by council in order to put a pause. It's not a refusal, it's a pause to allow council to do a study. So Susan Robertson and Alan Ramsey did an official plan aggregate policy assessment for the Caledon Township, looking at the 10 largest gravel user municipalities in the province, comparing their policies, suite of policies that are in place to protect the town from rapacious gravel mining, and found Caledon significantly wanting compared to other municipalities. So the interim control bylaw let the municipality put a pause on any expansion of any application, any approval, in order to review their suite of policies and then to upgrade them to better protect the municipality from the private sector gravel industry, basically. So that was very successful. It's a step you could take here in order to look at what you might be able to do with regard to this expansion. The Simcoe County Greenbelt Coalition is looking at trying to put a similar study together for Simcoe County, and that will allow the municipalities to compare the suite of policies they have or don't have with regard to aggregate in order to protect yourselves from being unable to have any oversight over what happens with gravel mining in your communities. Am I getting at your question, sir? Okay.
Any follow-on, Deputy Mayor Cabral?
No, that's good. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I know that it's an ongoing concern, not just in this municipality, but many other municipalities across Ontario.
Yeah. We have 20 other municipalities have passed a moratorium on new applications, approval of new applications and expansions, including such municipalities as Halton Hills was the first, but others came on like Peel Region, City of Cambridge, Hustlynch, Zora, Oromadante. I can't pick them all off the top of my head right now, but you'll be in a good a good company when you pass this bylaw for a moratorium.
Any other questions of council? Councillor Alexander.
Hi, thank you very much for your presentation. It was very informative. When I was kind of doing some of the background and looking at your website and stuff, from my understanding, the moratorium is indefinite. There's not a time period on it.
Yep.
Do you realistically have, like, as a group, an idea of a time period in order to collect all the data you need and do the reports and the studies, just as an idea?
Yeah, we've talked about this, and you can't put a moratorium forever, even though the industry's sitting on 13 times what we actually need. So there's lots of gravel there. And a moratorium, from our studies, a moratorium would not impact people's employment, would not impact the industry in any significant way. We think 2 years would probably be the window through which, maybe 3, where a good panel of experts, someone like Mike Powell, who is a hydrologist at the University of Waterloo, or Bill Shoddick, who's got water testing in Heidelberg in Switzerland and in Alberta as well, with some others, and maybe from the industry too, kind of blue ribbon panel that would review this and come up with better oversight practices. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other members? Thank you, Mr. Jeffrey, for being here with us and sharing your knowledge with
Sure.
us.
Thank you for having me.
Council, we are moving on to question period. Typically, we do require there to be pre-registers, but we do have members in the audience this evening. So at the will of council, we will waive that procedure. Members of the public are invited to ask questions of council, make comments regarding items on the agenda, or questions not on the agenda will be at the discretion of the chair. Are there any members of the public who wish to add comment or question? Not seeing any. Clerk Ainsworth, have you any submissions been received?
Thank you, through you to council. There were a number of submissions received from residents regarding the same topic, being the Lewis Pit expansion and their opposition to such. The residents who have submitted their letters and requested it be included in this evening's meeting for question period are Esther Allen, Nancy Parker, Stephen Potopnik, Devin Georges, Rod and Jean Rumble, and Grant and June Hunter. Along with those submissions, there was also a submission of a petition, which all of the emails as well as the link to the petition was provided to council earlier today. The petition as of 6 p.m. or my apologies, right before 6:30 p.m. had 362 signatures. And that information again has been provided to council earlier in the day.
Thank you, Clerk Ainsworth. At this point, we are going to move items 9.2 and 9.3 up in the agenda. Just bear with me 1 second as I flip to that. Item number 9.2 is a notice of motion regarding a moratorium on a gravel pit presented by Councillor Moore. Councillor Moore, do you have a mover or a seconder? Asking for a seconder. Councillor Fisher, and I will now turn to Councillor Moore to read her notice of motion.
Thank you very much, Mayor Coughlin. I'm just going to go ahead and read the whole notice. It's lengthy, but if there are any questions after, you will have an opportunity to ask. Recommendation. Whereas Ontario currently has over 5,000 licensed pits and quarries located throughout the province that are able to meet the expected near-term needs of Ontario's construction industry. And whereas applications continue to be submitted without a definitive determination if there is a need for additional supply. And whereas gravel pits and quarries are destructive of natural environments and habitats. Whereas pits and quarries have negative social impacts on host communities in terms of noise, air pollution, and truck traffic. And whereas the urgent need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in order to combat climate change has brought awareness to the very high carbon footprint associated with the production of concrete and asphalt, where our major end users of aggregates. And whereas there is an obligation to consult with First Nations peoples regarding the impacts of quarries on treaty lands and a responsibility to address those impacts. Now therefore be it resolved that the Ontario government be requested to impose an immediate temporary moratorium on all new or expanded gravel mining applications pending a broad consultation process, including with First Nations, affected communities, independent experts, and scientists to chart a new path forward for gravel mining in Ontario, which proposes criteria and processes for determining the need for new and expanded gravel licenses, recommends updated policies and restrictions for gravel mining below the water table to reflect current groundwater sciences, develops new guidelines for reprocessing in order to ensure sustainable aggregate supplies, recommends a fair levy for gravel mining that includes compensation for the full environmental and infrastructure maintenance costs to the local community of extraction and distribution of aggregate, provides greater weight to the input by local municipalities to lessen the social impacts from mining operation and trucking throughout their communities, and proposes revisions to application procedures which fully honor First Nations treaty rights. And further, that council request a delegation with the Minister of Natural Resources and Forestry at the 2023 Roma Conference to discuss the township concerns. And further, that staff be directed to request the province present an education session for area residents regarding the aggregate licensing process and regulations to be hosted by the township. And further, that a copy of this resolution be sent to the Honorable Doug Ford, Premier of Ontario, the leaders of all provincial parties, the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, AMO, and all County of Simcoe municipalities.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Council, are there any questions at this time? And seeing none, all those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Moving on to. Never heard that in a really long time too. Moving on to 9.3, a notice of motion again by Councillor Moore, moved by Councillor Moore and seconded by Councillor Garwood. And I will just pass it over to Councillor Moore.
Thank you again, Mayor Coughlin. 9.3, notice of motion regarding an interim control bylaw related to aggregate operations. This recommendation is that council be requested to obtain a legal opinion regarding an interim control bylaw related to the aggregate operations and land uses.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Are there any questions regarding this? Deputy Mayor no, that's me. Deputy Mayor Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. And actually a question through you to Director Spagnol. And I guess my question would be, I'm thinking back to the interim control bylaw that we put in place with respect to cannabis facilities and how it might apply in this particular situation as well.
Director Spagnol.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Through you to Deputy Mayor Cabral. The cannabis, the interim control bylaw that was established for the cannabis production facility review was done under the Planning Act. The process was initiated to study land use policies to regulate and provide direction to council and staff as to how to deal with cannabis production facilities in agricultural areas. From a process perspective, it was brought forward by way of a bylaw. The bylaw specifically referenced the study that was to be commissioned and outlined the specifics that the study would look at, with the objective to move forward and implement those findings through future zoning amendments or official plan amendments based on the findings. The interim control bylaw was set in place for 1 year, and then it was extended for an additional year to follow through with the recommendations of the report through the required official plan amendments and zoning bylaw amendments. So in essence, what an interim control bylaw in this instance here would need to do is refer to a study, and the study would be aimed to look at various considerations as it relates to aggregate operations and aggregate land uses in the township.
Thank you, Director Spagno. Follow on.
Please, thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Just out of curiosity, this is through you, Mayor Coughlin, to Director Spagno once again. Does Township currently have any procedure, process, or bylaw in place to regulate or have oversight of aggregate pits in particular?
Director Spagno.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Through you to Deputy Mayor. Creatures of habit. 2 years of clicking unmute. Through Mayor Coughlin to Deputy Mayor Cabral. The existing zoning bylaw currently does have zoning provisions that establish setbacks, establishes permitted land uses for aggregate operations. The official plan also provides directives with respect to what needs to be considered when there's zoning bylaw amendments or when there's pit operation expansions and things of that nature. So currently there are directive policies in the township official plan and the zoning bylaw as it relates to aggregate operations in the township. The one aspect as well, just to circle back to the interim control bylaw, township staff did seek a legal opinion in that instance as well. And as far as staff is concerned, the motion is in line with what was done with that interim control bylaw.
Thank you, Director Spagno. Are there any additional comments or questions from council? Seeing none, all in favor? And that is carried unanimously as well.
Sorry, Mayor Coughlin, you're muting yourself.
I apologize. I do. I'm sorry, Deputy Mayor Coughlin. I was just letting the residents who have joined us this evening know that they're happy or they're welcome to leave now, or if they'd like to stay, they're welcome to do so or exit at any point. My apologies for not turning the mic on.
No worries. There was a lot of smiling, so I figured I was missing out on something good.
Thank you again for being here with us. Council, we are going to move on to item 5.1. May I have a mover and seconder to approve the minutes of council? Deputy Mayor Cabral, Councillor Garwood, that the minutes of council listed herein be approved as presented. Minutes of the regular meeting of council of November 2nd, 2022. Are there any questions on these minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? And that has carried. Moving on to action reports, 6.1. May I have a mover and seconder to approve the action reports? Does council, and as I read these out, if council would like to pull any items, which would then mean that we are going to provide either an amendment or redirection, or if you do have any comments about anything, we can do so and still vote on this all at one. So the action, a mover and seconder on the action reports, items 6.2 and 6.3. 6.2, the 2023 council meeting schedule, and the 6.3 Bill 23 More Homes Built Faster Act 2022 and the spring water comments. Deputy Mayor Cabral. I apologize. I need a mover and seconder before we can speak. Moved by Deputy Mayor Cabral, seconded by Councillor Moore. Thank you. Continue, please, Deputy.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. It's in respect of 6.1 and actually just questions with respect to the provincial Bill 23 6.3 that I'm hoping possibly Director Spagno might be able to provide some insight.
And is this just direction then, or are you just a comment that you have?
No, actually, some questions I'd like to get further information on.
As there's only two this evening, I'm just going to ask council if we can just move each of them separately. So moving first, item 6.2 has been moved by, 6.2 has been moved by Councillor Cabral and then seconded by Councillor Moore. Are there any questions on 6.2? And seeing none, all in favor? And that is carried. And separately now, council, in order to discuss 6.3, I would need a mover and seconder. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Fisher and Councillor Thompson seconding. And this is Provincial Bill 23, More Homes Built Faster Act. And I think I'm going to turn Director Spagnell, if we can have comment from you before moving to council, please.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Bill 23 was released by the province with the objective to build more homes, as it's been widely broadcasted and reported that there is a housing crisis in the province. And what essentially is proposed through Bill 23 are sweeping changes as it relates to planning, as it relates to the Planning Act, the Development Charges Act, the Heritage Act, the Conservation Authorities Act, and some others that off the top of my head, I just can't reference at this point. The point of this report is to provide council with some of the high level impacts that Bill 23 are anticipated to have on the municipality, Springwater specifically, but this also applies to municipalities across the province. And essentially, the takeaway from the report is that the framework of a development pay for development is shifting to the public pay for development by way of development charge exemptions for non-profit housing developments, development charge exemptions from studies needed to take a close look at growth, the impacts of growth. So that could be growth management strategies, master servicing plans, things of that nature. Also exemptions from development charges on things such as additional residential units, provide the provision of attainable housing, both from the rental standpoint and from a sales standpoint, which all lead to what staff can really quantify as a shortfall in funding needed to pay for infrastructure to support growth. And in general terms, that is thought to be the impact whereby either the taxpayer will have to pay for that shortfall, or the township will need to defer services, or there may be other options that'll have to be looked at to try to deal with that funding gap to provide the services for existing residents in concert with new residents that are coming to the municipality as a result of growth. In addition to that, there are also Planning Act changes related to the Ontario Land Tribunal and appeal rights. And just to give council an idea of the sense of how much this bill is evolving, I understand that there have been revisions released today as it relates to this bill, which staff will need to take a look at to assess what the impact is. So I understand that there's been some revision to the bill with respect to tribunals and appeal rights, and haven't got into those further revisions, but other type exemptions also include, and just to clarify, on site plan applications for developments of less than 10 units, waiving requirement through site plan control for landscaping and taking a look at exterior design. So there are quite a few changes, and not to get into the Conservation Authorities Act, but the Conservation Authorities Act is one whereby essentially the Conservation Authority would be limited in its ability to comment on Planning Act applications. They would be limited to only comment on aspects related to hazard land considerations for their regulation and their permitting process. In addition to that, the County of Simcoe, under the bill, essentially would have no approvals under the planning regime. So these are very extensive changes that are coming down the pipe, and basically from a commenting standpoint, very short commenting periods. So many of the comments that staff are asking council to consider and endorse today are required to be submitted by no later than end of day tomorrow, as it relates to a number of these acts. As far as the consolidation of the provincial policy statement and the growth plan, the province has submitted some very pointed questions as part of their review to municipalities, which staff plan on reporting on later on. Those comments are due at the end of December. And really what staff is looking for from council for this report is consideration of the comments provided in the appendix to the report, and also looking to obtain any further comment that council would like staff to relay as part of the environmental registry submissions that we're going to be looking to submit for tomorrow. That summarizes my my overview of the report and the bill, and I'm available to answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you for that, Director Spagnell. Councillor, are there any further questions for Director Spagnell? Deputy Mayor Cabral?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Through you to Director Spagnell. Actually looking for a few examples, if you might, Director Spagnell, and I want to thank you for the thorough report. It was nice the way it was broken down and how the comments were ascribed to each particular section. I just know that if the DCs aren't going to be forthcoming, there's only two places that the money can come from in the short term, and that's either our existing taxpayers or by us taking on debt until the new folks are in place and paying their fair share. And I know that we're not the only ones that are concerned about that. When it comes to the LPAT, though, I'm kind of thinking there, what they're talking about for third party would be kind of like Friends of Simcoe Forest with respect to the ERRC. I think that that's a good comment there, that folks should be able to, if it's in their backyard, have representation at LPAT. So good to see that in there. But my one question I had for you, if you don't mind, is if you could provide maybe a possible example of, I know we've struggled with the Conservation Act kind of slowing things down. It looks here like the provincial government is trying to speed things up by providing exemptions. Could you kind of provide a couple of examples where that might be of benefit to township, or is that something that is actually a bad thing?
Director Spagnell?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, through you to Deputy Mayor Cabral. I think first it's important to thank Mr. Schmidt and and our Director of Finance and our GM of Infrastructure and Operations, because this was a joint report. I figure I should probably say thank you to them, because if there's any questions that I can't answer, I definitely will be looking at them to provide those answers. So I'll just make that statement first off. But I think as far as it relates to the Conservation Authorities Act, I mean, there's a couple of options that may be available to municipalities across the province from a review standpoint. So to determine whether or not it's a good thing or a bad thing, we don't know yet. But one of the options would be potentially third-party review by ecologists that are experienced in taking and in dealing with and reviewing environmental impact studies. Now, this could be a good thing from the standpoint where you've got somebody dedicated to reviewing these reports and ensuring that from an environmental standpoint, applications are considering what they need to consider to protect the environment. But on the flip side, the question is, are the resources available to allow for a timely turnover of those reviews? So there's always this question about whether or not the resources are available to be able to support the framework that's coming forward. And from a consulting standpoint, what are the costs to that? And are those costs beneficial to the municipality, or would they be beneficial to the developer? But that would be a situation where it'd probably be developer pay. So the cost, the implication to the municipality to provide that service and process applications in a timely manner will have to be reviewed as this all unfolds. And I mean, I also forgot to mention the fact that we're also dealing with Bill 109, which established some pretty aggressive timeframes for municipalities to conduct and complete reviews and provide approvals, which ultimately could result in refunding of fees. So whatever framework municipalities decide to choose, they're going to have to be cognizant as to the level of service to ensure that we have an expedited process in place and that the resources are available to make sure that it is expedited and that the proper things are being looked at.
Thank you, Director Spagnell. Other members of council? Right. Seeing none, we will now move on to, thank you. We have a mover and second already, so thank you, Director Spagnell, for that, and council, all in favor? And that is carried. Now we can move on to 7.1. May I have a mover and seconder for the information reports? Councillors Garwood and Deputy Mayor Cabral, that the report items listed herein be received for information. 1, 2022 post-election accessibility report. 2, 2022 municipal election. 3, ministerial delegations at the 2023 Roma Conference and 2023 conference listing. 4, building services monthly activity report, October 2022. 5, bylaw services monthly activity report, September and October 22. Are there any questions on any of this information in the reports? And seeing none, all those in favor? And that is carried. And we are moving on to our verbal reports. And at 8.1, we will ask General Manager Ramdeo, or there he is. Good evening, General Manager.
Good evening, Mayor Coughlin, sorry.
We're going to get it wrong for a while. I think we just need to accept those all new names now.
Yes, we will. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor Cabral, members of council, good evening. For the new members of council, generally what I do is I provide an update on the Midhurst development as to what's happening there. This evening, I'll concentrate on Midhurst developments, but in time, I will expand it to include other developments that are happening within the township. And so that'll come in time. On the Midhurst development in the mixed subdivision just off of Snow Valley, there are a number of things that are in the final stages right now in anticipation of first occupancy in about 2 to 3 weeks. Those items that are in progress are the commissioning of the water plant. And we're going through the commissioning of that. That should be finished within a week or so. We do have the draft permit to operate that water plant. So that's ready to go. The neighborhood park is complete. It will be mothballed for the rest of the winter, but it is complete. And the acoustic fencing that's necessary for this subdivision, that's also complete. The final aspect that needs completion before residents move in is the intersection at Snow Valley coming out of the subdivision. And paving for that either was today or will happen this week. But that is coming, and that will be the final item. And then they're ready for the new residents, subject to the building department's approval. Over on the east side of Bayfield, so there is the Midhurst Heights subdivision over there along Gill Road. That developer, it's a different developer, and that developer is proceeding with the removal of the topsoil. So they're stockpiling the topsoil on site for reuse and also leveling the site for future work. Their plan is to complete what would be the section adjacent to Gill Road, to complete the leveling on that section and leave the balance for the spring. After they complete the leveling on the west section, I expect them to stand down for the rest of the season. And that brings me to the end of the update for this evening.
Thank you, General Manager Ramdeo. Councillor, are there any questions on the verbal update? Councillor Moore?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Through you to Mr. Ramdeo, just a quick question. When you mentioned the acoustic fencing, when I look at that, it looks like a normal entryway. You're speaking of the entrance, I think, off of Snow Valley Road. Can you just describe, because you are, of course, our engineer, what that is and what benefit that brings to the people either who live there or the people driving by, or the commercial properties along Snow Valley?
General Manager?
Through you, Mayor Coughlin, to Councillor Moore. Yes, the acoustic fencing, it's really to mitigate the noise that will be coming from Snow Valley into the community that it's being built. And the idea is to reduce the noise level, not to eliminate it, but to reduce that noise level. That's the idea behind it.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? Thank you, General Manager Ramdeo. At this point, we will move on to our county update. We yesterday at the county had a 7-hour orientation. There are 22 new members of County Council with 10 returning members. It was very insightful. It was very well run, very informative. Yesterday, they also had an opportunity for members of county council seeking warden or deputy warden to present their names forward, at which point I put my name forward for deputy warden. This will be brought to a vote on the 13th at the inaugural of county council, to which members of council and public are invited to attend, at which point all candidates will have an opportunity for a 5-minute address, and then the members of the House will vote. So I'm just going to not sleep again for a few more days, but is there any questions on the inaugural event at the county? And I have nothing further for a county update. We will move along to our municipal updates. Do any members of council have municipal updates? Any tree lightings coming up, any wagon rides, or? Oh, Councillor Fisher.
Actually, on the 3rd of December in Midhurst at the Pavilion, we're going to have a tree lighting ceremony. Starts at 6:30, I believe. And we're actually advertising it on Facebook and Springwater. Yeah, that's it. So we'll have caroling and hot chocolate, and of course the tree lighting itself. It's a new tree that was purchased only months ago, and pretty exciting.
Thank you. And I believe that they were encouraging members of the public to bring items for the food bank, I believe.
Thank you, Jen. I forgot to mention that.
Mr. Monk reminded me
Thank
today.
you. That's right. We're encouraging members of the public to bring that for the Elmvale Food Bank.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor Garwood.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Yes, there's quite a few holiday events happening in Ward 1 over the next few weeks. On December the 2nd, the community will kick off the festive season with the Elmvale Christmas tree lighting. That will happen right in the Elmvale Gateway Parkette there at 7 p.m. And then later on that weekend, on December the 4th, everyone's favorite community event during the holiday season in Elmvale is the Santa Claus Parade. And that'll take place throughout the community at 1 p.m. And then the following weekend, the sleigh ride in the village will be back on December the 9th, and that will be from 6 to 9 p.m. Kids, crafts, whatnot, and that's open to all residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Alexander?
So Hillsdale will be having their Christmas tree lighting on December 3rd at 6 p.m. at the Hillsdale Community Center. They obviously do the tree lighting. There's usually a choir there. There's kids activities, and this year they're going to add a sleigh or wagon ride as well to the event. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson, please.
December the 9th, Menacing is having their annual Christmas tractor parade. And December 10th and 11th, it will be Christmas in the village of Anton Mills, and would like to see everyone there.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And Menacing also has their tree lighting. So there was a list passed around to council, and our residencies are all available on the website. And it's just really great to see all these in-person events coming back. So I also wanted to highlight for council residents and staff that we have a member, a Simcoe County resident. He does live just in the border in Oro-Medonte, but he is a student of EDHS who I spoke about earlier. This gentleman, or this, I was gonna say kid, but he's not, he's 19, has won. He's a bricklayer and stonemason by trade, attending Conestoga College, was asked to compete in a world skills trade competition. He did so at the Ontario level, was successful, and went to BC to represent Ontario, where he came in first. And he is currently in Austria right now, representing Canada at the World Trade. Today was day 1 of the competition, and he's off to a good start. There are 19 countries competing in his trade. Closing ceremonies are going to be on Sunday on the World Trade Skills YouTube channel. So from all of us here in Springwater, Cam, we wish you all the best of luck and bring home the gold. All right, and if there are no further municipal updates, we will move along to notices of motion. Council did earlier deal with 2 items moved up, and now we have item 9.1, which is a notice of motion regarding a land acknowledgement, which will be presented by Councillor Garwood. Moved by Councillor Garwood. May I have a seconder for this, which is Councillor Thompson? And I will turn the mic over to Councillor Garwood.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. So I'm going to read the recommendation now. Recommendation, whereas acknowledging the land is an Indigenous protocol used to express gratitude to those who reside on these lands and to honor the Indigenous people who have lived and worked on this land historically and presently. And whereas it allows people the opportunity to appreciate the unique role and relationship that each of us has with the land and provides a gentle reminder of the broader perspectives that expand our understanding to encompass the longstanding rich history of the land, our privileged role in residing here, and to speak to understand our place within that history. Be it therefore resolved that council hereby directs staff to work with community partners, including consultation with Indigenous communities, to draft a land acknowledgement statement for the township of Springwater.
Thank you, Councillor Garwood. Councillor, are there any comments or questions at this time? Councillor Fisher?
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Garwood. Could you clarify, are you looking for a land acknowledgement document, or are you looking to have us read an acknowledgement at the beginning of every council meeting?
And Councillor Garwood.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Through you to Councillor Fisher. Upon doing some research, there are a variety of municipalities surrounding us, whether it be the Simcoe County District School Board, whether it be Wasaga Beach, whether it be the City of Barrie, Midland, have these adopted land acknowledgements. So the idea was to put forth and work with staff, and again, these community groups, to ensure that we not only have an official land acknowledgement, but also one is read at the beginning of council meetings or township related events. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Thank you. I guess in comment, I'm not sure, we're supposed to kind of maintain a bit of a distance from, association when we're having our council meetings. We're representing taxpayers, and of course, that's an inclusive thing all itself. Certainly a land acknowledgement document, plaque in the front lobby of the administration center, certainly for any specific occasion where it would be a specific day or whatever that we might have that we could do yearly to really promote it. I think if you do it all the time, I think you take away from the effect that might have if you actually said, we're going to have a land acknowledgement document, we're going to have a land acknowledgement day, maybe a day in the fall that can be proclaimed in that month specifically for that purpose and promoted in that fashion, and certainly something in the lobby to that effect too. And as I said, maybe any particular event, Springwater Township event that we would be out there, or one of us may be out there at, to be able to read. I think that would be fine. I just don't know if it needs to be read at every single council meeting. So I guess if I was going to suggest even a friendly amendment, that's where I'd be. And I would also like to suggest that whatever document is produced obviously has to come back before council for final improvement. So those would be my comments on this.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Cabral, for the comments. I think the intention of this is that we establish what that acknowledgement will be. Council will have an opportunity at a later date to decide whether this becomes part of our procedural meetings or whether it will be posted in the lobby, what we do with it. I think that this, from what I'm understanding, and I will look to Councillor Garwood to confirm, this is just having us establish and create our acknowledgement. And I'm getting a head nod. So council, we're not voting on whether or not this becomes a plaque or this becomes a day or part of our regular meetings. At this point, we are just voting on whether we would like to see a acknowledgement created and established by the municipality. So as we have a mover and seconder, oh, Councillor Fisher.
Would we then be asking staff to devote time to engaging Indigenous communities and essentially drafting, our staff here, drafting this land acknowledgement statement?
Yes, that is correct. Councillor Alexander.
Through you, Mayor Coughlin, to Councillor Garwood. So in your research and looking at these, is this the format that some of the communities that you have mentioned that are currently doing this, is this kind of the format? Do you know that they've moved forward with this to make this decision, like through using staff time to create, and then the decision of whether it's a plaque, whether we read it, however?
Thank you. And CEO Schmidt, if I can ask for your comment on this, whether this is something that is typically done internally or something that would be done anyway.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, through you to Councillor Alexander. So typically, I think what we really need to consider is what role does the township really want to play in the sphere of diversity, inclusion, and equity, as well as truth and reconciliation. And to be quite honest with you, Councillor Garwood and I have not had this conversation. So, the thought is we want to reset. We have a new council here. I think it is in the best interest of the township to move forward with the land acknowledgement, whether it's read at each council meeting and or the frequency of when it's addressed is still up for consideration, I believe. The intent here, I think, is that we move forward with staff and with our partners to establish a land acknowledgement, bring that back for council's consideration. I am supportive to Deputy Mayor Cabral's comments about having a plaque in our Township Administration Center to acknowledge the lands that we're on. So again, from staff's perspective, we'll be very supportive of this. Yes, it would take some of our time to do that. But we're happy to do that and work with our partners to bring something forward for council's consideration.
Thank you, CEO Schmidt. Councillor Moore, please. Councillor Cabral, I'll get to you next.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Just so that Councillor Garwood is aware too, that before every library board meeting, we do say a land acknowledgement piece. So in order to save maybe some staff time, they could review what they've already created. It's very thorough. It's very, I think it's complex too, but it speaks to all the important pieces. And Jody, I know, would be happy to share.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Deputy Mayor Cabral.
Thank you, Mary. Mayor Allen, actually along those lines, I was just going to say it might be something, seeing as we're going into budget deliberations, that it might wait until after that's been finalized if staff were going to devote any kind of time to it. That would be my only suggestion, but I certainly concur with Councillor Moore. If something already exists that might be suitable, then that might be the way to go.
Okay. Seeing no more. Oh, there. Councillor Fisher.
Sorry, 2 points to make. First of all, I agree with Deputy Mayor Cabral. If we're going to devote any time to it, staff members, staff's time, I think it would be better to do it after the budget. And on a secondary note, I know we've talked about Singing O Canada at the beginning of our meetings. We talk about diversity and inclusivity. I'll share my opinion that frankly, inclusively, whether you're a recent immigrant or a member of the First Nations or anyone in between, if you will, I think we all fall into that envelope of being Canadian. And I think that should be all encompassing at the beginning of our meetings. But that's my opinion on that matter.
Thank you, Councillor Fisher. Seeing none, at this time, I'm going to call for the vote. So all in favor? And that motion has carried. Are there any, oh, no. Are there any other notices of motion? Thank you. And that would be me. At this time, I would like to turn the chair over to Councillor Moore.
Does anybody have a notion, notice of motion they'd like to bring forward? Mayor Coughlin.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. And through you, Chair, I'll be bringing forward a notice at our next meeting regarding speed signs and partnerships with private and community groups.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I'll pass the chair back to you.
Thank you. Are there any additional notices of motion? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 10, items for future consideration. Are there any items at this time? Councillor Moore?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I wonder if you could just explain to the rest of council what items for future consideration are, and so that they know what kinds of things they can bring forward.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. And we did during our orientation discuss, that's okay, we did discuss the difference between a notice of motion and a item for future consideration. And as a council, we said that we would sit down and look at whether we do need to have both of them there, or if just having a notice of motion would carry us. So yeah, perfect. Any other? Perfect. All right, so moving on to our confirmation bylaw. May I have a mover and seconder? Oh, I thought you were tapping me. May I have a mover and seconder for the confirmation bylaw? Councillors Garwood and Moore, that the bylaw 2022-086 to confirm and adopt the proceedings of council in a regular meeting held on November 23rd, 2022, listed here and be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk. All those in favor? And that has carried. And just before our adjournment, Deputy Mayor Cabral, could you stay on for a quick minute so we can get your smiling face in a picture with us as we celebrate our very first regular meeting of council? We'd like to thank you. And before we do adjourn, I would like to thank Michael and Evan in our IT department. This has been run very successful. And when I talk to people at the county and tell them that we are running hybrid meetings, they think that we must have a very, very large team of IT. So I think this went really well tonight, and congratulations to council. I think we did a great job. Staff for being here. And may I have a mover and seconder to adjourn, please? Oh. Typically questions are during question period, but okay. Absolutely. I will, as soon as we vote on this, I'll come around and talk to you and we'll get those questions to who they need to be. And if you do want to come back at another time and have them read into public record, we can do that for you as well.
Not going down there to see how they're operating. And questions that I have are extending it to better quality stuff available through borehole.
These questions are pertaining to the Lewis Pit. Yeah, absolutely. So we'd be happy then after the meeting, we can address that and we can get those off for you. Thank you. Council, may I have a mover and seconder to adjourn the meeting? Councillor Moore and Councillor Garwood and Deputy Mayor all those in favor? And thank you. And our meeting is adjourned. And Deputy Mayor Cabral, if you can just hold on for 1 second here.